So my name is May Webber. I work for the Royal Parks on a project called Mission Invertebrate, which is all about exciting people about the invertebrates that call the Royal Parks home. We manage over 5,000 acres of green space. Many of you might be familiar with some of our central London parks, such as Hyde Park, the Regents Park where I work, and some of our larger parks that have ancient trees that are very well known, such as Bushy Park and Richmond Park. I'll be talking more about that after our guest speaker this evening, who I would like to introduce. So we're really excited to have him on our last meeting this evening of the sessions. So I'm going to introduce Rabbi Mark Goldsmith, who is Senior Rabbi of Edgware and Hendon Reform Synagogue, a community of 3,500 people in northwest London. He gained Semiach rabbinic ordination, for those who don't know, in 1996 from Leo Baeck College in London. He teaches on Jewish business ethics and is a co-founder of EcoSynagogue, which I'm really excited he'll be talking more about this evening. He loves the grassroots work of community building and is working to help our religious communities to be good environmental citizens. So without further ado, please take to the stage Rabbi Mark Goldsmith. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you. It's a really lovely opportunity to speak about Judaism and the environment. And I speak as one rabbi representing, to an extent, one part of our tradition, the Reformed Jewish tradition. But one of the things that's special about Judaism in the environment and ecological issues is that it's one of those where there really are not denominational differences in Judaism. I'm going to speak with you tonight for about 15 minutes to give you an overview of Judaism and the environment. But then I'm also going to bring an Orthodox colleague in by video, who many of you will know already, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, who's the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations, and who's going to take us to the end with a story that is very important within Jewish understanding of our relationship to the environment. So let me start by popping up my slideshow that helps to guide what I'm going to do, because I want to share text with you. As many of you will know, Judaism is so much guided by our Jewish texts over many generations, over millennia. And so when everyone's trying to explain how does something work in Judaism, you need to do that. You need to say what's in our texts, because that's always the starting point. So here we go. Now, these, of course, are texts which are shared between Jews and Christians, and I suspect that some of them you may have even had in the Christian presentation of Christianity in the environment. Also, some of the ideas, certainly, I know, are shared with Islam, and you will find that there are versions of this in many different faiths. So please be aware that that's, I think, also something important to Jews. Our wisdom, we understand, will be found in other faiths in different ways of getting to the same idea. So let's begin at the beginning, literally. This is Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1, the one that begins, in the beginning was the heavens and the earth. And the reason why I begin there is because this gives a picture of the world, an image of the way that the world is and the relationships that there are. On the left-hand side is our children's Torah that we have here in our synagogue, which shows some beautiful pictures to illustrate the story. But early on in the story, in the creation of Adam, of the first human being, to translate it as man, by the way, is a choice. Adam essentially means any human being. The idea that God created humanity in God's own image, in the image of God created God, that person, male and female, created them. So anything which is a responsibility of man is also a responsibility of woman in Judaism. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and this is, by the way, the Hebrew in the bold there, paru uravu umilu et haaretz, and replenish the earth, fill up the earth, and then a difficult word, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living being that moves upon the earth. So there is a sense in the initial starting myth of Judaism that humanity is somehow over the earth. And a way that we understand that now, and these things do change over time, is that that means that we have a responsibility for the environment around us, for the ecology of the earth, at all times, in the way in which we can make a difference. So the understanding is that humanity can make a difference to the earth. We then have a choice as to how we do it. So let me move forwards from that into this question. Does that then mean that we can be irresponsible in the way that humankind uses the earth for our immediate benefit? Or does it mean we have to have a godlike eternal perspective, a sustaining perspective on how the earth develops? And the idea that humankind is created in the image of God in Judaism would tend to suggest absolutely that you need to have an eternal perspective, a forward-looking perspective. In the story that Rabbi Mervis is going to share at the very end, you'll hear that sense of eternal perspective, even from one generation to the next, on how the earth develops. So the direction of Jewish teaching has taken the latter path. And if we're given the earth on which and by which to live, we have to do so in a sustainable manner so it can be given on from generation to generation. Now, if you ask how do you find out about Judaism, reading the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, is only the beginning point. There's a huge tradition of interpretation of those to bring and draw meaning out of the Torah. And one set of this is called midrash, drawing out of meaning, explanatory interpretations of the Torah from 2,000 years ago, so about 1,000 years after the publication of the Torah. God shows Adam around the Garden of Eden in this midrash from what's called Kohelet Rabbah, which is the midrash on the book of Ecclesiastes, for those who know their Bible, where the speaker in Ecclesiastes says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, there's nothing new under the sun, an incredibly depressing message, as if we can never achieve anything. And what I love about midrash is very often it deliberately undermines the scripture that it's built from. So it has this picture of God leading Adam around the Garden of Eden, saying, look at my works, how beautiful they are, how excellent. For your sake I created them all. See to it that you do not spoil and destroy my world, for if you do, there will be no one else to repair it. And that's a lesson from 2,000 years ago, that sense that humanity can spoil and destroy the world. And we know that that is the case. There's some interesting ideas in environmental protection in our Talmud, for example, from the 3rd century and onwards, saying that you don't keep goats in the land of Israel. Now, in fact, that they are actually kept in the land of Israel. And one of the reasons why was because of the amount of environmental degradation that they can cause. Now, that has actually changed, although there were some issues apparently about which species of goats were okay for the land of Israel and wouldn't cause too much degradation on the hillsides. But that's a question from 1,700 years ago, but the idea is still there. How can you make sure that what you do and human activity does not damage the world? So let's start with that sense of responsibility. And from that comes a doctrine in our Talmud called Bal Tashchit, a mitzvah. So a mitzvah is a Jewish duty. And like many mitzvot, they're derived from extreme situations, which is certainly the case here. And I know that this extreme situation will have some resonances right now and difficult resonances, but yet the basic responsibility for the environment comes out of this mitzvah of Bal Tashchit, not destroying. So the requirement not to destroy the world is expressed as a mitzvah, a Jewish duty in itself, the mitzvah of Bal Tashchit. As often in Judaism, this mitzvah is derived from an extreme situation. Here in the book of Deuteronomy, also in the Torah, from the rules of warfare. So when a city is being besieged in a war, even the aggressor must not destroy the fruit trees that are outside or inside the city, so that the future is sustainable. From the book of Deuteronomy, how much more so, reasoned our rabbis in Talmud, should we conserve the resources that make our lives sustainable in peacetime? If you protect fruit trees in wartime, you absolutely must do, of course, in peacetime. And here is the piece from Torah itself. When you besiege a city a long time in making war against it to take it, do not destroy its trees by forcing an axe against them, for you may eat of them, and you must not cut them down, for is the tree of a field a man that it should be besieged to you. And you can see, if you can read a bit of Hebrew, This word in bold is the word tashchit, do not destroy. And out of that comes a Jewish sense of the environment, which mandates us, for example, to be involved in recycling in our day, involved in being careful about habitat destruction, in the mitzvot, Jewish duties not to engage in. But that's not all. The Torah also includes the idea that we have a responsibility to preserve the productivity of land, and to do so in ways which were known to be productive at that time. One of them is called Shemitah. Now, this is actually an area in Israel itself, which says on that poster on the truck, Kan Shomrim Shemitah, which means on this farm, we observe the mitzvah, the Jewish duty of Shemitah. Let me explain what it is. So you'll probably know that there's a Jewish commandment to have a day of rest. And of course, it's one which is shared with Christianity, even if the day is different, except if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, in which case it's the same. That's the Saturday, but basically for us, Friday at dusk to Saturday at dusk. The Shabbat is a day of rest, which is a mitzvah for all Jews. And anyone who is in their household, it mandates a day every week when we reduce our use of the earth's resources. We pause from new creativity and cut down our impact on the world. The idea being that there is a time when you do not wrest anything out of the world, out of the soil. Onwards from the Shabbat, the Torah also mandates an entire year of rest for the land called Shemitah every 7 years, and a restoration of land to its ancestral holders every 50 years, following a further year of rest for the land. Now, the historical record suggests the 50-year jubilee, as it was called, the Yovel, from which comes the English derived from Latin word jubilee. It was every 50 years, but it wasn't observed. But we do know that the 7 years was observed, partly because we have independent Roman sources attesting it and saying how ridiculous that the Jews don't farm their land for 1 year out of every 7. What a crazy way of treating the economy. As we now know, only by reducing what we do, and therefore indeed harming our own economy, can we actually help our environment to restore. So nowadays in Israel, it's still observed by some farms that 1 year out of 7, they're not farmed. And indeed the Shemitah year comes around next year. And so many Jewish communities will be doing things to celebrate that. One of the things that, by the way, it means is if you buy a bottle of Israeli wine, you will find on it, it will say whether the winery observes the Shemitah year or whether it doesn't, whether it has that fellow year every 7 years. Torah mandates that food and productivity have to be shared as well with the disadvantaged in society, the poor, the orphan, and the stranger. So one of the issues around Jewish ideas around the environment is that it's not just about you, it's also about the poor, the orphan, and the stranger, wherever they may be. So that sense of a global sensitivity around the environment is very important. That sense that what we do here has huge effects on the other side of the world, or in poorer societies, again, mandates a care for the environment. Behind all of the mitzvot is the essential concept in Judaism that humanity doesn't own the earth, God does. And our use of the earth is conditional on our respect for it and willingness to share it in a sustainable manner for the benefit of all humanity. And our daily prayer that we say twice a day, the Shema, its second paragraph, speaks about rains coming and the ability of human behavior to make a difference to those rains. Now, it's done in sort of a sense 3,000 years ago of reward and punishment, but we know that what we do and the effect, the ways that we behave, make a difference to the productivity of the world and to climate. And so most Jews nowadays will interpret that second paragraph of the Shema as requiring that we care about climate change and do our best to prevent it. This is the piece itself from the book of Leviticus, from Leviticus 25, where it speaks about keeping a Sabbath of land. 6 years you sow your field and 6 years you prune your vineyard, but you leave it on the 7th year. Our Jewish festivals are all linked to the environment in one way or another. There's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the New Year, and the Day of Atonement, which are about humanity and what human beings do. But Rosh Hashanah is also known, our New Year, as the birthday of the world, and a sense of reassessing where the world is each year, including in environmental terms. But our other festivals around the year. If you go around this wheel anti-clockwise, you'll see Sukkot, which is the festival where we build ourselves a shelter like the one you can see in the top right-hand corner, have our meals in it, flimsy, open to the winds to really feel the effects of the environment. And indeed, a sukkah is not a sukkah unless it could be blown down by the wind, so you have that experience. Many synagogues will also work with local homeless people on the festival of Sukkot, and we'll see that as an important thing to do. But the roof has to let the weather in, so if it rains, you get wet even when you're eating your dinner in it. And they're great fun to build. Basically, this is the Jewish version of the Christmas tree, the thing that you create at home that can be that you get to enjoy and hang whatever you want on it, but generally natural things that you've grown yourself. And what you see on the right-hand side is the lulav, which is a myrtle branch, a myrtle branch, a palm branch, and a willow branch, and an etrog, which is a specially grown fruit similar to a lemon, which symbolize the different kinds of species of trees that grow in the land of Israel in particular, and then become a symbol for our protection of the environment. As you'll see in Leviticus 23, when you reap the harvest of your land, you bring a sheaf of your first fruit of your harvest to the priest. So you brought that to the temple. It was a religious duty. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you don't go right up to the corners of your field, nor gather the gleanings. You leave them to the poor, the stranger. And that's what it means to be a godly or holy person. And for the festival of Sukkot, you take the boughs of good trees, branches of palm trees, and you rejoice before God 7 days. So each festival has its harvest element. We also have a particular festival for trees, very relevant to royal parks, and indeed, our synagogue, every year we plant a tree in our synagogue garden. So last year it was a pear tree, this year it was a blackcurrant bush, partly so we can make pear and blackcurrant crumble. And we also planted a tree in our local park, Cannons Park, which we will be able to see bloom. Now, the reason for the new year for trees being when it is, which is generally in January, February, is because in the land of Israel, the almond tree blossom comes out at that point, so you can see the beginnings of springtime. It's a bit later here in Britain, but it's to celebrate trees every year very specifically as themselves. And I'd encourage the royal parks to hold Tu B'Shvat tree plantings like Cannons Park did for us this year. There's a Jewish mission which is expressed in a prayer recited traditionally 3 times a day. L'token olam b'malchut Shaddai, that we are to be God's partners in repairing the world. So this word, tikkun olam, repairing the world, is an essential Jewish responsibility. We know the world is broken. So Jews always have this sense that the world is broken. If you've ever been to a Jewish wedding and seen somebody smashing a glass, we do that to say the world is broken and we are responsible to bring it back together again. And it can be about Jewish history that's created a brokenness, or it can be about the world around you. There's a Jewish tradition when you build a building to leave a bit of it without plaster on it, or just to leave a tiny bit unfinished to say the world always needs repair. And we say this in this prayer 3 times a day. And only sustainable development by as many of the world's people working together as possible can we have a hope to repair it to become the world, going back to the beginning that God intended Adam, humanity, to steward. So how are we trying to do it? Well, this is EcoSynagogue. So I'm going to take you to the EcoSynagogue website for a moment. I hope this will work and you'll be able to see it on this screen. It's all that won't work. Jeeves, can you give me a wave if you can see it? Are you able to see the EcoSynagogue website?
We can't see it. We can't see it yet.
We can't see it. So I'll stop share on that and go into the EcoSynagogue website. There we go. There we are. So now you can see it, yeah?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so this is a combination of synagogues all around the country of different denominations. And what we are trying to do is to get synagogues of all different denominations to audit themselves, create an environmental audit so they actually know what their environmental footprint is, and they begin to work on reducing their environmental footprint. There are many, many different resources to be able to help with that, promoting environmental sustainability and engagement across the Jewish community. There are now nearly 30 synagogues that are members of this and are working on their own footprint. It very much follows the model of eco-church, EcoSikh, and eco-mosque. Eco-church really led the way in audit yourself, create resources there to be able to find help, to be able to make your environmental footprint better, and to have lots of events which help us to celebrate that. So now I'm going to move back to the last bit of the my presentation. So I am here. Okay. And I hope we're in there. Yeah, lovely. And the last bit is a story from Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, which from the 2nd century, when it was originally told, says, whoever we are, a Jewish responsibility together with all humanity is to make the world a better place. It's about 1 minute and 30 seconds long. And again, give me a thumbs up if you can see it, if you can hear it, Jeeves.
The coronavirus lockdown has highlighted for us in so many ways how irresponsible our...
Oh. I'm sorry.
With regard to the environment. We now need to do something about it. The Talmud tells a story of a great Torah scholar, Choni HaMagel, who was once on his way. He saw an elderly man planting a carob tree. He said to the man, don't you know that it takes 20 to 30 years for a carob tree to bear fruit? Why are you doing this? The man replied, I'm not planting this tree for myself. I'm planting it for future generations. Choni laughed at him. He went into a cave, fell asleep, and 70 years later, Choni woke up. He came outside and he saw young children playing at the foot of a carob tree, and they were munching the fruit as they were playing. Choni said to them, where's the old man who planted this tree? Ah, they said, you must be referring to our great-grandfather. What an incredible person he was. It is thanks to him that we are blessed today. It is in this spirit that we need to invest wisely in our future world. And primarily, we must protect our environment. It's with this in mind that I'd like to congratulate all of our EcoSynagogues in the UK, and also all those who have been organizing Green Shabbat. It's a great concept. And over Green Shabbat, let's talk about the environment, but more importantly than that, let's now do something about the environment.
So Rabbi Mervis speaks about Green Shabbat, and Green Shabbat is an annual Shabbat, so a Saturday morning, Friday night, where synagogues teach about the environment. It's only been going for a few years, and the idea is really to make sure that we have a continual campaign in the Jewish community to make a difference and to get better at this work. So that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. That was absolutely such a great insight. As I did mention, we've got some round of applause as well from everyone, which is lovely. As I mentioned, if you do have any questions, please do pop them into the chat box. Mark, that was fantastic. I want to first ask you a question that I have been asking all of our other speakers as well. So talking about the environment and the future and protecting it for future generations. With that in mind, what gives you hope for the future? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I think for me, what gives me hope is the ability of synagogues and other religious organizations to inspire those for whom they're important to get involved and to get to work on making a better environment. We got, out of religious groups around the world, probably half the population of the world, maybe even more, who are part of it. So we could make an enormous difference if we ensure that our religious buildings and our religious institutions are exemplary environmental citizens, that we pass that down the grassroots of our communities, and that becomes an aspect of religious responsibility. We've done a lot of work to combat other things that seem to be just generally there as if they were unchallengeable, such as racism, for example, such as deep poverty. And we can work on it. We can do the same on the environment. So that gives me a lot of hope. But it needs an activism. That's what matters. But every one of our faiths, I suspect, over this series, you've discovered has teachings that say you've got a responsibility to protect the environment. If we can use those, we can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely, fantastic. And so before we started the webinar this evening, Mark, we were talking about the green space that you have around your synagogue and what you're doing there. Would you like to tell the participants about some tree planting that you recently did?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of green space, but we feel that it's important that we use it well. Again, I suppose I would have to say as a kind of bit of an example as to what you can do. So we plant a tree a year, that's for sure, and we do it on Tu B'Shvat, on the New Year for trees. It was amazing to be able to show our children in the synagogue through the various social media that we have that their pear tree was now giving blossom for the first time this year. That was really cool to be able to do that. We are also, our youth clubs bringing environmental issues into a lot of what they do. Including the uniform groups. We have the brownies and the guides and the scouts, etc. So they created the environmental audit of the synagogue. We grow the material to build our sukkah from. You saw the shelter that we create. We grow that here on site. So we, instead of cutting things down or buying stuff out of garden centres, we grow it here, and that's really nice. Also, we're aiming to grow some of our foods that we use for religious purposes. Horseradish is important in the festival of Passover, for example, and to grow it here on the grounds. There is indeed a Jewish farming project going on at the moment called Sadeh in Kent, really trying to teach Jews, who very often tend to be city people, how their food actually gets to them and the environmental costs of it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for that absolutely, fantastic insight. I'm sure everyone will join me in saying thank you. If anyone does have any questions, please do pop them into the chat box. Mark, I believe will you be staying on until the end of this meeting if anyone has any questions?
I will, and I just had one from Eliza saying, in preparing your rabbis of the present and the future, is the importance of sustainability taught? Yes, it is now definitely beginning to be taught. It probably wasn't. We would all know that story of Choni the circle maker that Rabbi Mervis told, and we would know about Bal Tashchit. We know those mitzvot. The applicability of that to actual action that you might take in a synagogue when you become a community leader, that's a more recent thing. Yes, it is beginning to happen more. It's very much led, I have to say, by our youth movements, which is interesting. So our youth movements now on their camps cater vegan, which is quite a thing to do when you've got kids who are used to eating meat at home, to eat vegan for a week or two. And I'm not saying they don't get protests, they do, but they're really trying to do their darndest to change people's habits.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again, Mark. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Mission Invertebrate project, and as some of you may be aware, we are doing some guided walks in the Regents Park towards the end, at the end of this series afterwards. So 2 dates, one in June and one in July. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about biodiversity and some of the nature that Rabbi Mark was talking about that is certainly worth protecting, and some of the fantastic species that you can see around central London, which perhaps some of you are unaware of. Certainly when I talk about the environment and some of the biodiversity that we have within the Royal Park, such as hedgehogs or bats, lots of people are unaware that they're around. And of course, those two species that I've just mentioned are nocturnal. So it's very easy to forget all of the nature that's around us. So I'm just going to share my screen. Do just bear with me. Jeeves, are you able to allow me to share screen, please?
Yeah, you should be able to now, May.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Brilliant. So where nature meets faith, obviously that's been the title of our series, and now we're just going to be talking about kind of the nature side and actually what nature we have in the heart of London, in the Royal Parks, which as I said is where I work. So we manage over 5,000 acres of green space, and some of the nature within the parks you might be familiar with, such as foxes, and on the left hand side at the top there we've got the blackbird, which you can often hear singing right up until it gets dark in the evenings, and the map in the center, you can see our parks there. Some of you may have visited them. Some of our more popular parks such as Hyde Park and Green Park right in the city centre, and St James's Park as well, with a pelican illustration there, as we have some pelicans that were brought over from Russia, I believe. So they've been there for quite a while. So you can see here the diversity of colours and fascinating creatures that call the Royal Parks home, and they certainly are worth protecting. I work on a project called Mission Invertebrate, which is all about protecting the invertebrates that live amongst us in our green spaces. And we're aiming to enrich wildlife in the Royal Parks, and we're doing this by improving habitats and getting people of all ages excited about the natural world. So many of you will know that invertebrates are animals without a backbone. So we are vertebrates. So for example, you know, as mammals, we have our vertebrae, our spinal cord, whereas invertebrates don't have this. So invertebrates such as insects, mollusks, lots of things that live in the sea, such as octopus, shrimps, and that kind of thing, which some of you may enjoy eating. And so invertebrates are absolutely vital for our environment. So for example, they're pollinators that provide us with food. They are recyclers that give us healthy soils. They're pest controllers, and they provide food for lots of other animals as well, including us. Now, the Royal Parks, they have been so important for many people as a space for people to see family, for people to improve their mental health and well-being. So nature nature around us, so whether it's in our gardens or in our parks, has been shown to improve mood, reduce feelings of stress, and improve our mental health. And all these benefits certainly have never been more important than now, given the circumstances of this pandemic. And you can see here there's a child playing in one of our parks, which I just think is so lovely to see when children are outside enjoying the green space. And to the left we have our wonderful daffodil display from the Regents Park. And I know, talking from experience with me living in London, I don't have a garden, so these parks are even more important, and certainly it reduces my feelings of stress when I'm amongst green space and seeing other people enjoying green space amongst the birdsong, seeing butterflies and all of the trees. Now, with more people accessing green space during the pandemic, there were threats to green space. So you can see on the left-hand side, unfortunately, we had a huge increase in litter, and with a huge footfall, more people visiting our parks, lots of our green spaces were under pressure. So we've been able to mitigate that by putting in large bins, which I think lots of green spaces have done. And you can see this one in particular includes a really beautiful picture of an emperor dragonfly. And although that is a threat, so you can see here the picture on the right hand side, this is a photo that I took in Regents Park. Now there used to be lots of grass around there. It is quite a shady area, so from people walking you can see there's a path that's been made. However, that has actually provided the opportunity for a particular invertebrate to make their home. So on the left-hand side, I'm not sure if anyone knows what this is, you may do, is actually the work of a mining bee. And so, for example, a species that this could be, the Ashy Mining Bee, the females dig holes into the ground and they create a nesting chamber. And you can see here, these two nesting chambers have been created by a female Ashy Mining Bee. So although there has been some kind of negative impacts of an increased amount of people using our parks, we have seen that there are always positives. And certainly the fact that people are exploring green spaces for the first time is a massive positive. And that's exactly what the parks are there for people to enjoy. So this is a map of the Regents Park. If anyone is interested, you can go onto our website. There's lots of information about the Regents Park, its history, including Primrose Hill. This is a map here. So it's actually a very large green space in the north of London. And you can see that we're very fortunate to have different habitats. So you can see we've got a large water body, the boating lake, which means that we have lots of water birds, lots of dragonflies, for example, that live by water. So dragonflies have a very interesting life cycle, like lots of insects. The females will lay her eggs either just by the water or inside within the water body itself, and the larvae are actually aquatic. And it's not until they become an adult, get wings, once they've undergone metamorphosis, and then they are land dwelling. So they have this fantastic kind of differentiation between the larval stage and the adult stage. So water bodies are really important for improving biodiversity, and often on a warm summer's evening you can see bats flying over the boating lake picking up insects like mosquitoes. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the habitats that we have in the Regents Park. If you're wanting to come along to the guided walks, which I'll give you a bit more information about at the end, these are the kind of habitats that you can expect to see. So during the summertime, we have our wildflower meadows that have been put in by Mission Invertebrate. Lots of the habitat enhancement that we do is done through park staff, our contractors, but also through fantastic volunteer effort. We have volunteers to thank for a lot of the brilliant biodiversity that we see in the park. So we built a bee bank in this area of the park, and you can see there's a sign there, bees nesting. So it's essentially kind of a mound of earth with bare patches of soil, and this is where the mining bees will make their nesting chambers. It's south facing. They prefer warm south facing spots because they obviously rely on the sunshine to give them the energy to fly and keep them warm. And this the photograph that you can see on the right hand side is actually a male hairy footed flower bee, which I think is just a fantastic name, a name so because it has hairs on its feet, on its legs. So it's really great to see that we have been able to attract this bee species by providing the habitat for it. To the left hand side, we've got a beautiful common blue, and underneath that we have a 6-spot burnet moth. 6-spot burnet moths are actually day flying, so if you do come along to the guided walks, we should hopefully spot some day flying moths. Actually, some moths do fly during the day, although most are nocturnal, so they're not always easy to see. We also have our reed bed habitats, which surround the boating lake that I mentioned, and some other smaller water bodies that we have in Queen Mary's Gardens. So reed bed habitats around the boating lake have huge ecological benefits, so improving the water quality and of course providing habitat for birds and invertebrates. And you can see as well that they attract dragonflies and damselflies from the photograph on the right hand side. And of course, by having these invertebrates, for example, all of these insects, we then attract the birds, bats, and you can see this picture of a coot, which is the blackbird on the left hand side. They're very noisy, so you might hear them when you're around the green spaces in London. We certainly have quite a lot within the Regents Park, and they're actually building their nests at the moment. So if you do happen to see a coot, then do look around, because they build these raft using lots of the materials around them, but often part of the reed bed as well. They'll take reeds and create an amazing kind of floating nest, which is very hardy, and you can see their little chicks as well. So do look out for them. They are around at the moment. Unfortunately, we do get some birds making nests using plastic, because obviously there is you know, some of the plastic pollution they do use as nesting material. And of course, it would be wrong to mention reed bed habitats without mentioning a reed warbler. So we're very lucky to have these birds within the Regents Park and Primrose Hill. So these birds are incredible, because they migrate from sub-Saharan Africa all the way to the UK. So I feel very honoured that they choose to spend their summer and raise their chicks within the Regents Park. And the first birds to arrive this year arrived on the 12th of April, and they have a very distinctive call. I'm afraid I haven't got a video recording of their call, but do take the time afterwards to listen to the call of a reed warbler, because it probably will be like nothing that you've heard before. So I just wanted to mention as well, if anyone is interested, and I know some of you have got in contact with me, for example, about tree planting, or wanting to just learn a little bit more about green space and what we do, or you want to meet new people, you want to experience being outdoors, maybe to improve your mental health and well-being, there's lots of opportunities to volunteer with us. So one of the big opportunities that always seems to be very popular is doing hedgehog surveys. So we have a breeding population of hedgehogs in the Regents Park, which is the only breeding population in central London. And actually, I was out doing a hedgehog survey on Friday, just gone. So I was out there with some volunteers all night, looking using infrared cameras to look for hedgehogs, and we did manage to find some. So there's lots of different things that you can do volunteering with us. We also have an allotment as well, so one in Regents Park and one in Kensington Gardens, that you're able to volunteer there. Food growing is a fantastic way to improve your mental health and well-being. And actually, if you do volunteer at the allotments, then you get to take the produce home. And I know that the asparagus is often very popular with lots of people. You can also become a citizen scientist, so learn how to identify perhaps the birds or the invertebrates that call the Royal Parks home, and support us with really important data collecting. And I hope that when, if any of you are able to join for the guided walks, that I'll be able to talk to you about different species and how to identify them. And then maybe you'll feel confident enough to go on and become a citizen scientist, and provide that crucial information. So, for example, one of the things that takes place every year is the Big Butterfly Count. Some of you may have heard of it, and it's run by the Butterfly Conservation, which is a charity that promotes the protection of butterflies and moths across the UK. And they encourage people to go outdoors between the weeks around the end of July and August and record some of the butterflies that they see. It might be in their local green space or in their garden. And that is really integral information for them to be able to map on a map, see where people have spotted butterflies. And it's just as important to make a note of where you've seen them and where you haven't, because of course, unfortunately, lots of our butterfly and moth species are in decline, as with a lot of unfortunately, a lot of invertebrates at the moment. So it's so important to know where they are, and that means that we can then protect them and protect their habitat. So if you are interested in volunteering, then you can head over to our webpage and type in volunteering, and all of the information comes up. Or if there's anything specific that you'd like to get involved in, for example, if you're particularly interested in volunteering at Regents Park or doing the hedgehog surveys, then please do email the volunteering@royalparks.org.uk email and register your interest. So I'm just going to end with talking about the guided walks in the Regents Park. So there will be two. So one happening on the 26th of June, starting at 11 AM, which is a Saturday, and one on the 1st of July starting at 11 AM, which is a Thursday. And this will be an informal opportunity to come along, maybe meet people that you know, or come along and make friends in the green space that is Regents Park. So there will be an opportunity to walk around. I'll show you the different habitats that we have, and also a bit about the importance of invertebrates. And fingers crossed, we'll be able to spot lots of interesting insects, and look at, for example, pollinators, look at the allotment, and all of the kind of food growing that happens there. And I think this is, you know, a fantastic opportunity as well to spend some time outdoors. I know lots of us have been stuck inside for so long during the pandemic. So please do register your interest. My email is there if you'd like to get involved, and then I will email out the information to you. If you'd also just like to make contact for any other reason, then there's my email. So do get in contact. So the Regents Park, the closest station is the station Regents Park on the Bakerloo line. There's also Baker Street as well, if any of you are travelling by underground. There's lots of different bus routes as well, and of course lots of places, for example, if you're cycling, to lock up your bikes, and also there is parking. So all of that information on how to get there is on the website. I'm just going to end there, as I'm aware there might be some questions coming in. Let me just check the chat. Certainly if there's any more questions for Rabbi Goldsmith as well. Let's have a look. Oh, brilliant. Oh, Barbara has also posted about an opportunity on the Saturday the 5th of June at 11 a.m. The Zoroastrian World Organization based in Feltham, West London, is holding an interfaith meeting to mark World Environment Day. Thank you for sharing that with us, Barbara. Brilliant. So I'm going to end there. If you do have any more questions, then please do pop them into the chat box. Brilliant. Oh, and also John has posted South London Interfaith Group are planting trees in November for 40th anniversary as well. So do make contact with John. Thank you, John, for your engagement throughout the webinar series. It's been fantastic.
Amazing. Before we leave, May, as well, I just want to say in front of everyone a huge thank you to you for chairing every single webinar for the past 5 weeks. So expertly chaired, and the questions that you've asked the speakers have always been amazing. Even the continuous question which you've asked, we need to tell our video editor to sort of get a compilation of all of the speakers answering that, because they were all fantastic answers, but amazingly chaired. And just thank you for the guided walks. It's not finished yet. I keep saying it's over. It's not. Please, everyone on this call, register for our guided walks in Regents Park, so we can meet everyone in person as well, because that would be amazing.
Exactly. Yes, and thank you to everyone for coming along to this webinar series. It's certainly been you know, such a fantastic 5 weeks, and I just want to say thank you to every speaker that has spoken during this webinar series, and of course to Rabbi Mark Goldsmith as well for taking the time to talk to us this evening. And I will also just pop my email into the chat as well. So if any of you are interested in coming along for the guided walks, then please do so. Please do email me. And if you want to find out more about the Royal Parks or Mission Invertebrate, then you can head over to our website and also follow us. We have various social media accounts, so please do follow us as well. And thank you very much for being part of this evening.
Hi, mate. We got 2 more questions in the chat, and we've
yes.
still got 8 minutes. So
yes, sorry, I have where are the questions? Yes, we have a question from Kate. I believe there'll be another one from someone else. I can only see Kate's question at the moment. I'll ask Kate's question, Jeeves, and then I will find the other one. So Rabbi Mark, are you able to just answer this question from Kate? So Kate has asked, with increased environmental concern, is there also a shift in attitudes towards non-human fellow living creatures within Judaism?
Sure, I think there is, Kate, in several ways. Thank you for the question. One of them is, what does kashrut mean? The kosher laws, which, as you'll probably be aware, are about what Jews eat, what Jews don't eat, for those who observe it. And one of the shifts that's going on is a greater concern for what we call sara'at ba'alei chayim, which means ensuring that the lives of animals are better. There's a sense of an excessive concern about the death of an animal. And indeed, you'll be aware that kashrut has at part of its core the idea that we should slaughter an animal as quickly as painlessly as possible with the traditional knowledge. And I know there's controversies around whether that is the quickest and most painful way. But critically now, many Jews are saying what really matters also is, was that animal brought up in a way which was considerate to its life? We're looking at land use, looking at habitat destruction, etc. And so that therefore what we eat matters to that. I mentioned before our youth movements, so many of them turning towards veganism in order to do that. And indeed a rabbi called Rav Kook, who was chief rabbi of Israel way back in, actually before it became a state in the 1930s, he was pretty convinced that in order to do all the things we were talking about, tikkun olam, bal tashchit, not destroying, that one should be vegetarian. So that's going on. In terms of treatment of animals, that's sitting there in our Torah text as well already. The idea that you have to be careful about the way an animal lives. And one of the classic pieces is, if you see the ox of your enemy lying down under its burden, or donkey of your enemy, you must lift it up. As in, it doesn't matter what you think of the other person, you don't take things out on an animal. So I think that's absolutely there. In terms of the invertebrates, it's a very interesting one. Well, one of the issues is, what do we do about protein for the future? And there are issues around whether, for example, bringing locusts back into the diet is a possible thing, because we know it was there in the original Jewish diet of the 1st century and before. And then Christians, of course, will be very aware of John the Baptist and his diet of locusts and wild honey. So there are some issues about where does protein come from. Now, I'm not quite sure that's exactly where May's concern would be, but that is another issue around living creatures.
Thank you. We just had a thumbs up from Kate. Thank you for the question, Kate, and thank you for that answer. So we did have another question from Barbara, which they asked, how long will the walk be? So the walk will be starting at 11 a.m. and it's scheduled for 2 hours, so 11 till 1, but there is absolutely no pressure to be there for the full 2 hours. It will be a kind of short stroll around the park, a kind of a easy pace around the park. So please do come along, even if you don't want to stay for the full 2 hours, or if you do, then you are very welcome. So the walk will be from 11 till 1, and I will also send through, if you register your interest, I'll send through all of the details about where we'll be meeting and the route that we'll be taking, and which kind of habitats we'll be going past, and what we're likely to see. So thank you for that question, Barbara. And Kate has just messaged as well, saying thanks so much, very interesting and inspiring. Thank you, Kate. If anyone has any questions, we do have 3 minutes left, so you're welcome to put a question into the chat box. I'll just see if anyone has one coming through.
Just one last thing with the guided walks, made the photography competition. The photography competition.
Yes.
Yeah. So you go.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, absolutely. I forgot to mention that. So my apologies, but lots of information is on the Faith Forum for London Twitter as well, if you want to find out more. But the photography competition, so it doesn't matter if you've tried photography or not, doesn't matter if you're taking it on a fancy SLR camera or just on your iPhone, but we're encouraging people to go outside and take pictures of nature. Perhaps that could be something like the tree, you're noticing the kind of the beautiful leaves emerging, or perhaps a bird like a robin, a curious robin that you've spotted. So any pictures of nature that inspire you, and please do tag us. Again, you can find the Twitter handle, for example, on Faith Forum for London, and tag us, and we will be revealing the winners first, second, and third, with prizes to be won as well. And as I said, you don't need to be a professional photographer, just anything that reminds you of nature and being outside in nature. Just take a photograph and share it with us, and you can use the hashtag #WhereNatureMeetsFaith as well. So thank you. And yes, we've also got a question from Rabbi Mark Goldsmith as well. For those who have been to all of the talks, does it feel that our different faiths share or diverge on their environmental understanding? Gosh, that's a fantastic question. If anyone feels like they'd like to respond, please do so. Please do so in the chat box. John has responded and said, I think they share a great deal, and we can learn a lot from each other, which absolutely. And thank you, Barbara. She's said, thank you for this series, so interesting and well organized. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being a part of it. We are approaching 8 o'clock now. Jeeves, is there anything else you wanted to finish off by saying?
No, it's perfect. Thank you, May, and thank you, Rabbi Mark, for coming on the call, and thank you everyone again. It's been an amazing 5 weeks, so thank you.
Thank you everyone. It's been a privilege. Thank you.